Welcome, everyone, to this week's live AMA with Danielle. I'm very excited for this one. This one's going to be a bit different because we're going to talk about both ops and sales and everything in between. And so, very, very grateful for Danielle being here. Before we jump in, for those of you that are new to these podcasts, it's a chance to ask all your burning questions to absolutely brilliant people in the space like Danielle. So, feel free to ask any questions in the chat as we go through. But before we dive in and talk about all things career journey and COO frameworks and Figma's IPO, Danielle, I'd love to hear a quick background. Who are you? Would love to get the quick story.
Cool. Thanks, Alexa. So first of all, I'm super excited to be here. Thanks for having me. Quick background. So I started my career in consulting, spent a lot of time in strategy, took a deviation to be a VP of sales, and now I'm back leading strategy at Figma. Probably more importantly, I'm a mom. I have two toddlers. And so if I have bags, you can blame them. I've also got two rescue dogs who you're probably going to hear barking in the background. Originally from the East Coast, but now I've been in California for like a long time. I think, oh my God, I don't want to say maybe 20 years. 15 years, 20 years, I don't know. And like in my free time, I'm usually with my kids, with my dogs. I'm also big into yoga, Pilates, stuff like that. So that's me, if that helps.
Thank you, Danielle. So something I would love to jump right into. You have one of the more unconventional career paths that I've seen in a really good way. Like I'm just so amazed. Because sometimes people are really good at ops and really good at sales, but not really good at both. So kudos to being able to do both really, really well. But maybe let's talk about how the heck did this happen? Like you went from ops sales back to ops, like why? Maybe we'll start there.
These are great questions. So, as I mentioned, I started my career in consulting and then I joined the biz ops team at LinkedIn when it's hard to believe now, but we were 5 people. We hadn't even gone public yet. I'm really dating myself as I say these things. But it's just to say I got into ops like pretty early, and I would say strategy, right? Strategic ops. And I spent a couple of years there, and it was just a wildly formative experience for me. So, the time that I was at LinkedIn, we went public while I was there. We grew at an incredible rate, and had like some exceptional leaders. And in particular, there were kind of a set of leaders that I worked with, all starting in the strategy and ops function. A set of them stayed in strategy and ops, and I followed a number of them for a while. And then a set of them actually went into revenue. And so there was this guy named Dan Shapiro at LinkedIn who came over from Bain and became a sales leader. He's now their COO. I believe he's still COO. Anyway, long story short is they grew a number of like strategic people into sales leaders. And so that was a path I was always curious about. I went off to business school after LinkedIn, came back and worked for who had been the head of biz ops at LinkedIn at a company called NerdWallet. He went more of the ops path. He was a COO, and then went over to Glassdoor, where the COO turned CEO was also from that LinkedIn kind of more opsy path. And I spent a lot of time working with sales teams. I love working with sales teams. Like I studied cognitive neuroscience strangely in undergrad. And like, I love the element of sales, which is basically like, how do you understand how people think and how do you make people take action? Or a lot of sales is even just feeling confident, right? And so how do you help people to succeed? Much more so than consumer businesses, which are really a lot less about kind of an individual's mindset or an individual's actions in the same way. And so I got kind of closer and closer to sales. And then some of the LinkedIn team who were strategy and then became sales leaders went over to Asana. This amazing woman named Edda Tekin was a CRO over there. And she brought me over to Asana saying, listen, I'm going to train you to be a sales leader. I did this transition. I think the best sales leaders are really business leaders. So like, come on over and we'll try this. And so I did that for a while. There was a lot of change at Asana while I was there. And, ended up leaving saying, I think I'm done with sales for right now. And I really want to go back into the world of strategy and ops, which is, I think, what I most love. So
It's incredible that in your career, you haven't followed really companies or roles. It sounds like you've really followed people. So can you talk a little bit about that?
yeah, I follow people exclusively. So, whenever someone asks me, how should I think about where I want to be in 5 years? I don't honestly have a great answer. And in terms of like how you could think about like planning that out, because I have never done that.
Yeah.
What I have done instead is at any point in time say, where are there people that I really like, that I really respect, that believe in me, that see like my magic, understand me, and where are they doing cool things, and where could I go maybe do cool things with them? And I will say I have like zero regrets on this approach. I think transparently, I actually learned the hard way at Asana. So I had always followed these leaders through straight from LinkedIn to after business school to NerdWallet to Glassdoor, ultimately to Asana. And then there was a ton of turnover there. And I went on a maternity leave and came back, and all the leaders who had brought me in were now gone. Um, and it was a completely different experience for me and not a great experience. And, so after that experience, I sat down and I was like, whoa, wait a second. I actually think for a second there, I started to get it wrong. Instead of following people and taking the opportunities that were presented because people saw me and understood me and believed in me and gave me different cool things to do, I felt like I had to prove something to someone about my ability to, be senior, be successful, like be a top sales leader, even in the wrong environment for me. And so when I started to look for what I wanted to do next, I exclusively reached out to people who I'd worked with in the past, who I respected. And what that meant was, when I ended up ultimately deciding to come to Figma, I forget if it was 5 or 6 like late stage conversations or job offers. They were completely different. You could not compare them to each other. One was a VP of sales. One was a director of sales strategy at a big company. One was, leading biz ops at Figma. One was being the first go-to-market hire at a really hot AI startup. I'll leave the names out of this. But anyway, it's just to say that like could not be more different. And they were all just sourced through me reaching out to people who, one was an international expansion role, actually, like crazily would have had me, traveling all the time, which I can't do. I have kids. But, it's just to say that these were so different. And it was all because I reached out to people who then said, hey, Danielle, I think you'd be great for this, or you think you'd be great for this. And that's how I, would always tell people to build their careers. I think it's just a much more, I don't know, it's going to sound hokey, but like kind of like heart centered, way to do things. People.
It's also it's amazing. I think that everyone should take that away of, even more than being heart centering, it's kind of better for your career and your kind of a happiness at work, I'm sure as well. And I know a lot of people chase sexy logos for their job, and that's not always the right answer. Like the right answer is kind of it really comes down to who are you working with, and are they gonna kind of sponsor me? Are they gonna let me kind of thrive and try and test? And you've done a phenomenal job of knowing that from day one. So I think that's, and also I never hear that from people. And so it's really interesting how you've managed to kind of stay true to yourself and do that where it's not the natural advice you would get.
I will say it is definitely not the natural advice, and people have often given me the exact opposite advice many times. But I just feel like that's always led me astray. It's funny, like as today, Figma is like a cool buzzy company, and we're awesome. I love Figma. I love everything about Figma. I adore this company. But for until now, I was not working at a cool buzzy company. I mean, even I remember when I took the job at LinkedIn, obviously they ended up being super successful and an awesome place to work and whatever. Although when I was there, we were working like 90 hours a week. So slight deviation, but it was very different when I was there. Then I went to NerdWallet, which is like a fintech company. And then I went to Glassdoor, which was honestly the best job I like ever had. But was not like a cool buzzy company.
Yeah.
And that like the best jobs I've ever had have not been in those places, and it's not to say they can't. Like I love Figma and I love my job at Figma and everything is aligning there for me in so many ways. But like the company is not the thing. The people are the thing.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter what you're selling if you're not, working for someone who believes in you while you're selling it or you're building it.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Let's go back to kind of your ops career. So I know that you've done a lot of the traditional ops things of kind of working in consulting, taking on ops jobs, going to business school. But what you've said to me is there's never a clear path in ops towards the exec level. Like sales, it makes sense. You become a seller, there's a track to being a CRO. Same with marketing, same with product, same with engineering. But with ops, it's kind of how do you navigate that? So tell me what is the clear path to being an executive in the ops world?
Yeah. I mean, I think that the like exactly what you're describing is partially why I decided to try out sales. I was like, well, if I look up the chain here, like where do I go? Like what is my end state just sitting in ops? And it is not as clear. And so, there's a I think not only a temptation, but there's often advice that you need to pick a lane, that you need to say, well, am I going to be in sales? Am I going to be in marketing? Am I going to be in product? Because otherwise, at some point, my career will tap out. Um, but I got really good advice at some point. That I'm still like figuring out like how I would think about, or if I even want to think about that. I think in ops, you can always get to like a VP level, right? There's a VP of sales ops, there's a VP of biz ops, there's a VP of marketing ops, right? Like you can get to the VP level there. The question is then how do you get into a C-suite beyond that? And I think you have two options. One is you can go to a smaller company. You can start at like, a Series A or Series B company that often is actually going to want, they might as their CMO or their, CRO, whoever it is, want to hire somebody who is more opsy because they need someone who can kind of like build the plane while flying it. That's an option. But I think another path is that if you do eventually want like a COO type role, let's say, those roles are far and few between. You'll notice that like every company has a CFO, every company has a CRO, every company has a CMO. Not every company has a COO. And so the reason for that is COOs tend to take on different flavors. And so there's the flavor of a COO where you're really more of like a finance based COO. And so you're going to have the finance team and maybe a couple of other teams. And that's how you become a COO that's kind of anchored in finance and grows from there. I think you can also see COOs who are anchored in revenue. And so you can take the sales path and then expand from there. And at CPG companies or companies that are just much more, consumer driven, even if it's kind of like a prosumer type company, you can see that also in a CMO role where you start with marketing and then you take on other functions and become a COO with like a marketing flavor. And so I think those are all options. But I think something that I think about a lot now is I think I got very caught in the trap of like, I must be in the C-suite. Like I went to Harvard Business School. I must end up there. And there are a lot of really wonderful, successful careers and successful, jobs where you're happy and feeling fulfilled, where that's not, where your end state is. And so, I would just push something I did a lot after leaving Asana and having had not great time at the end there was really digging deep into what my values were and what mattered for me. And I realized that what I need is to feel like I'm working with people who I love and respect, people who value me, and that team leadership is really important to me. I can never not have that. It's just like my favorite part of the day. Like I have to do that. But do I actually necessarily need to be in the C-suite? I don't know if that's actually what I need. I kind of like being behind the scenes. I like being the person who is sitting in the exec meetings and making sure that everything happens and making sure that everyone has what they need and driving, where we're going, but not having to be the person who goes and sits on C-SPAN, you know what I mean? Anyway.
No, totally. It makes so much sense. And I would be curious for you, like and I appreciate that kind of like vulnerability and self-reflection of, this is what I learned about myself, which I feel like not a lot of people can say that out loud. I'd be curious for you, going back earlier into your kind of ops career. I really like the framework you have of like there's different types of COOs, some that speak in finance versus marketing versus sales. But a lot of times I see that there's ops leaders that only have ops experience. Do you think that's something that's like okay, or you would suggest people get other experience as well?
I mean, I'm thinking of a couple of like really incredible biz ops leaders who didn't have non-biz ops experience. But what they did is, over time, I mean, the thing about different types of ops roles, certainly biz ops, is that you have the opportunity at any point in time to step into vacuums and take on responsibilities or ownership of things that may that have more of like maybe a GM flavor or maybe a revenue, like a sales flavor or a marketing flavor or whatever it is. And so, for example, right now we have a new tool out in the market called Figma Make. It's our prompt to app tool, like a 0 to 1 vibe coding tool. What it really merits right now is almost like a GM model because it's new. We have to figure out how to market it, how to sell it, how to price it, etc. There's really no natural person within the company to do that. So I'm kind of doing that.
That's so cool.
And it is cool. It's also a lot of work in addition to my day job, right? So, you
You're
end
doing
up with,
both.
and
Wow.
oh yes, of course, of course. Obviously. And so, you end up, sometimes it does require like being willing to like step out of your comfort zone and say, okay, there's someone to do this. I'm going to do it. And I'm going to tell you what my strengths are, what my strengths aren't, so I can get the support that I need to do it. But, the company values you doing it and you acquire other skills in the process. And so I think that's something to consider within ops. Like, you don't have to go do what I did, which is, go and be a VP of sales, or go be a VP of marketing, or, whatever it is. You don't have to do that. You just need to proactively make sure that in acquiring your experiences over time, that you will have examples to point to, and not even like for an interviewing perspective, but from your own like ability to talk about operating and running a business and leading companies at a level of depth, that you are taking those opportunities when they're presented to you. And I think a GM type model, often there are so many things within a given
Yeah.
business. Like right now in Figma, it's not just the Figma Make tool. We also have a government business we don't have a GM for, that like someone on my team is leaning heavily into. We also have our international business, which has a sales leader, but not like kind of mandates a more of like a GM structure. So we lead that. And so just looking for those experiences so that you can talk at a level of depth, and lead at a level of depth, I think is very helpful.
That's great. I love the GM approach. That's not even something I've thought about, but it makes so much sense for the way that your brain works and the type of projects and experiences that you have, matching the consulting with the operational work.
Yeah.
Makes a ton of sense. I'd be curious, do you think your ops work helped your sales role, and do you think the sales role
Mm.
helped the ops?
Yes. I mean, I am not, again, like, I don't think everyone has to do this to be successful, but do I think it has made me a better leader? Yes, I do. And so, when I was a sales leader, I was leading our SMB sales team, which SMB at the end of the day is it is a data operational model. Like, that is what it is, right? So you've got a big team of relatively junior sellers who are still learning their craft. And in the absence of having that craft that like an enterprise seller has, what you need to do is teach them how to be successful. And so it is, how many calls do you need to make? How many meetings do you need to set? What is your pipeline conversion funnel? Have you generated enough pipeline? How do you do those things? And how do you track those things? And then how do you build a system around those things? Like, a successful SMB business is a formulaic business, right?
Mhm.
Put in these inputs, generate these outputs, and that will lead to success. And so I think that, starting for me in SMB, it was incredibly valuable that I had so much. And actually, particularly, I was in sales ops for a while and sales strategy. I had the sense of how to like build a business and have the levers that you could pull, right? Like, what are the levers that I could pull to be successful, or to teach my team how to be successful? And so I think without question that made me a better sales leader for what I was doing. But then I think now, like I don't think it would ever hurt anyone's career to having sold, to have had sold. Like,
I agree.
understanding the seller experience and what it actually feels like to sell a product is not something that you can get unless you are in those conversations and you are somehow responsible for, them coming to a successful conclusion. And so, like, I see a lot of my role now, actually, Figma is a very product driven company. But we've launched a ton of really exciting new products, and we're getting deeper into the product development space, which means we're much more of a platform now. Um, and selling a platform is much more complex. And so I see my job at the exec level as a lot of times like bringing what I think it will actually take to succeed as a platform, bringing what I think it will take from a sales perspective to succeed, with any given product to the executive level, and then raising that to make sure that our sellers have what they need to sell and to be successful. And I think, there's now, for example, in this kind of like hybrid make GM role that I've taken on, it really helps that I've sold, right? Because I have the understanding of what will and won't resonate.
Yeah.
Yeah, and empathy. I think that's the other thing. Like, I should have mentioned that. Like, there's the understanding of the seller experience and what's actually going to if you've never sold, you can think lots of things would land in a sales conversation that would never land, right?
Yeah.
You're like, well, of course this makes sense. Well, it doesn't. And so I just had a conversation with one of our top sellers this morning. There's something we don't have that one of our customers needs. We'll have it very soon. And, I was like, here are your talking points. Like, here are the things that I would hit on if I were you. I could never have done that before. But then I think, yes, the empathy, like, listen, there's a reason I am not in sales right now and may do it again someday, but like, it's the hardest job I've ever had. It is incredibly hard.
Wait, which one is?
Sales.
Oh, 100%. Sales is job. Yes.
It is so hard. It is. And you eat what you kill.
Yeah.
Right. So, there's also, and it's not even, I think people had said to me, like, you can't understand what it's like to carry a bag until you do carry a bag. And I was like, yeah, because I won't get paid at the same rate. Like I have to, that's not it at all.
Mm-mm.
What it is that as a seller, your name is up in lights on a competitive dashboard on how you are performing against your peers every single day. And you can have had a great quarter and then it starts over again and you start at zero again. And so there's no other role where your success is in lights like that, or your failure at every single step of the way. And so I think having empathy for that as a leader is really important.
It's so, so important. I also think even if it's every role, it's not just ops. Like when I think about ops or marketing or engineering or product or anything, the people that, okay, let's say you can't have sales experience, but the people that are at least watching call recordings of how the prospects speak or how customers talk, what their needs are, it goes such a long way because when you're making recommendations and then it lands on the sales team and they're like, that is just so off from the reality. Totally. it loses that sense of trust. And so I think that the best way to do it is, try out sales and do it for a bit. But I think there's other ways to also get that empathy and kind of deeply in the prospect's head. But it does give you kind of a level up in both jobs.
I totally agree. And by the way, if you're in product or engineering, trust me, salespeople want you on those calls.
Yeah.
And so that's also something that I think is important that people don't realize is there's often things that are really valuable that you can bring to customers. Like find out how to get in front of customers. Listen to some calls. They're not coming in totally cold. Prep for the call, but find out how to get included. And it will, without question, change your perspective on the business. I think every time.
Yeah. Something that I meant to touch on earlier, I get this question a lot. I'd be curious, are you happy that you went to business school, landing in jobs like sales and biz ops, which aren't actually biz ops is, yeah. Sales is not.
Nope.
So do you think you're helpful for these roles and are you happy you went or are you like that wasn't worth the time?
It's a great question. My answer is a bit complex. So I did not need business school to get any of the jobs that I've gotten. Like every single job that I've gotten was honestly like even Figma. So literally, coming from LinkedIn, then I went to business school, NerdWallet, Glassdoor, and Asana were all directly from connections that I made at LinkedIn. Like people I had worked. And by the way, when I say connections, I mean real connections. I mean people you really work with and you really know. And then even Figma too. It's a long, kind of funny story, but the CFO of Figma worked for me at NerdWallet way back in the day. And now, at the time I was like, to be clear, like I pretty much worked for him back then too. That's like always been the dynamic. But he's incredible and like massively successful. I did his reference for Figma back in 2017. And so now he's my boss. And so, it's just to say that like for me, I didn't actually need business school to like get any of my jobs, right? However, and in sales, by the way, I actively tried to hide that I went to Harvard Business School and I got outed on a call once and I like never heard the end of it. I mean, my reps made fun of me for months about this. And so, like my answer is nuanced in that like it didn't actually have bearing on the jobs that I got. But what I think it did do for me was I think, just like, look, there are so many reasons in this world that people cannot give you credibility. Why not find another way to give yourself some credibility in the market? So maybe it wasn't a direct input into any of those jobs, but who knows? Someone looked at my profile and was like, oh, you know what? She's smart and she does have some training in this area. But I also think probably more importantly, business school came at a time in life where like I needed a pause. I think I went into business school thinking I wanted to do something totally different than where I came from and ended up right back where I started. And it was the right decision for me. I just needed a break. I just needed a breather and I needed time to I didn't focus on like the academics of business school. I focused more on the like personal exploration of it. And I think that was super valuable.
It is a good point that it is funny when resumes from business school going into sales, it's like the opposite effect.
That you're like immediately thrown out of the pile. It's like, thank you. Get out of here.
Yeah. But and it's so crazy. I always say this that folks that went to business school would make great salespeople and great people in go to market because it's such a strategic role. But there's kind of this like both people at business school don't want to go into sales and people hiring for sales don't want to take candidates for business school. So I will be curious if that changes in the future.
I think that's right. I think, I think that is true. I also think though that something that you really need in sales that I feel like I didn't have, there's two things. One is you need to have the desire to win at all costs. This is why you see so many athletes going into sales, right? Like you need to believe that even if the customer maybe doesn't really need your solution, they need your solution, And I think sometimes where I got myself in trouble was I would overthink it. Like I don't have that like eat to kill instinct. And so I would get in this like, oh, maybe they're right. And like, that was really unproductive in the call. Like overthinking does not serve you. And so I think that's one thing that is just like sure in sales. Another thing that I found in sales was you have to love the high of the win. You have to love it because the lows are so deep that like you have to get such a high off the high of the win. When I closed the deal, I was like, wait, I want to go analyze this. I want to go take this back to the lab and figure out like why we won and how to replicate it and how I can make sure that people feel successful in doing this again. That also didn't serve me because I wasn't getting those highs to carry me through when we lost a big deal or I had to drop my forecast or, we were in challenging conversations. And so, I agree with you that that is something that should change. I just, personally found these two elements that I think are kind of common in people who look like me, like deeply analytical overthinkers, that, made it so that I think that sales, there were some things I wanted to consider if that was actually the right path for me.
For sure. There's also a little bit of a grass is greener. Like I think people in sales thinks ops easier and people in ops think sales is easier.
Definitely. Definitely. And neither one is easier.
Yeah.
It just isn't,
You always hear the people. There's so many times where people are trying to get into the other. And then it's a good reminder that like figuring out where you get energy. You got energy from doing the analysis of what went well, what didn't. Let's break this down. Let's look at data. Whereas others get energy from, I just had this massive win. I had a great quarter. How do I do this again? And it's really important to know. And it's okay if things drain you. Like if that constant kind of grind of sales drains you, okay, like then you go to the next thing where things actually give you energy, which is really cool.
Yes. And that's how I feel now. I feel like there are things that drain me in my job. Let's not get overly like dramatic. I was complaining of one of them last night. But, like by and large, I get energy from my job in a way that, that I think is the most important thing because that's how you end up being good at your job. Is that you might not love it. We don't all love the day-to-day elements of our jobs. It's not possible, right? To like love every minute of every day of probably any job. But what is possible is to feel like you don't leave your job more drained than you showed up.
Yep.
That's the goal.
So last question, do you think you'd ever go back to sales?
I think I never say never. I think I learned though that so I would say two things. One, I just have a lot of empathy. It is a very hard time to be a seller right now. The market, two things are happening. One is that obviously we started to see that SaaS, like kind of a SaaS bubble deflation post-COVID around, call it 2022, 2023. And I think that has hit a lot of teams quite hard. But then I think there's also the disruption right now from AI is enormous.
Yes.
And so it is very hard. And I talk to buyers, of AI all the time. And it is very hard to figure out how you distinguish yourself and what you're offering in your tool in the space where AI makes everything seem possible. But then, of course, like as you get under the hood, that's often where you realize, oh, this is not exactly what it was promised, right? So I just think it's a very challenging time to be a seller. And I have so much empathy for people and respect, frankly, for people who are like out there doing this right now. I do not think it's an easy job. I also think, though, that there is kind of a bit of an evolution or maybe like a debate around what is a successful way of leading and running a sales team. There's the model of, I would say some like the old school sales model, which has existed for years, which is basically like deal by deal. I want you as a leader to be deep in deals and talk to me about deal after deal after deal and just make sure we're going out and winning these individual deals. There's another model, though, which is use AI to automate whatever is possible and to build processes that enable your team to like basically see the benefits of, one person's actions can now have an impact on the whole. And like, rising tide lifts all boats, right? And then run it like a business, like a data-driven business. That type of role is more interesting to me. But that is not how every company is running their teams right now. And I would tell you, I don't actually know what the right answer is in this new world.
Change.
And so, I think for me, I'll probably wait to see how this all shakes out. Maybe. Never say never. I get asked to do it all the time. There's a lot of, it's funny. Like I always wondered if I could get into sales with my background. And then now that I have it, people are like, oh, you have ops and sales? Like, come be a sales leader. And so we'll see. But I'm very happy doing what I'm doing right now.
I feel like we could have a whole other podcast on how sales has changed, how to actually differentiate in the AI world. But we are out of time. Danielle, thank you. This was awesome. This is a very unique perspective compared to what we've ever had. So I'm really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much.
Gosh, thanks for having me. This was so fun.
Amazing. Bye, Danielle. Bye, everyone.
Bye.